At 9:06 p.m., a neighbor in a quiet Tulsa neighborhood heard raised voices, then two sharp cracks that split the night air. Gunshots. Minutes later, officers stepped through the open front door of a well-kept suburban home. Inside the foyer, two men lay motionless, one on his back, the other face down, their bodies only feet apart. The air was still. The silence. Heavy. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, nothing stolen. Whoever had walked through that door didn't break in. They were let in. And within minutes, they were gone. Detectives would later uncover that this wasn't a random act. The killer wasn't a stranger. This was personal, and it had been building for over a decade. It began in North Carolina, 12 years earlier, when a bride-to-be was just 2 weeks from her wedding day. The night before she was meant to marry, her twin brother and her fiancé disappeared. No goodbye, no trace. She spent years searching for them, until she found them living under new names, hundreds of miles away. And when she didn't call the police. She came here, and within 4 minutes, they were both dead. Her name was Monique Harris, and this is her story. Monique Harris was one of the most respected trauma surgeons at Fairview Memorial Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. Colleagues described her as steady-handed, precise, and unshakable in the operating room, the kind of doctor who could walk into chaos and bring order in minutes. She grew up in Durham, the older twin by 7 minutes. Her brother, Marcus Harris, never let her forget it, often joking that she'd been making the decisions for both of them since the day they were born. They were raised in a small brick duplex by working-class parents who taught them the value of hard work and family loyalty. In their family, you didn't just show up when things were easy. You showed up especially when they weren't. Monique's path was clear from an early age. She carried medical books in her backpack when most kids were still deciding what they wanted to be. She earned a full scholarship to Howard University, pushed through medical school, and survived the long, punishing hours of residency. 16-hour shifts, missed birthdays, cold dinners reheated after midnight. It was a relentless climb, but she reached the top. Marcus was her opposite in many ways, more relaxed, more social, and never in a rush to figure out his future. He didn't share Monique's academic drive, but he had a way with people that made him welcome anywhere. And no matter what direction life pulled them, the two always found their way back to each other. In 2007, at a community volunteer event, Monique met Daniel Rivers. He was an athletic trainer, tall, confident, with a persistence that caught her attention. He didn't shy away from her demanding schedule, and over time, he became part of her daily life, and a familiar face in the Harris family home. Marcus and Daniel clicked almost instantly. They shared a love for sports, spent hours watching games, and hit the gym together while Monique was buried in back-to-back hospital shifts. To friends and family, it seemed like a perfect match. The man she loved and the brother she'd grown up with, building a friendship of their own. By 2009, Daniel proposed during Fairview's annual hospital gala. One knee, a small black box, applause from a room full of her colleagues. They set the wedding for March 6, 2010, a small, elegant ceremony in Raleigh. Marcus would stand as best man. For Monique, life felt complete. A career she was proud of, a man she loved, and her brother there to see her into the next chapter. That chapter would never be written. In the months leading up to the wedding, the connection between Marcus Harris and Daniel Rivers seemed natural. They laughed easily in each other's company. They swapped workout tips. They'd grab lunch together when Monique was tied up at the hospital. To anyone watching, it looked like friendship, the kind of bond most people would want between a fiancé and a sibling. Monique took comfort in it. She thought it meant her two closest relationships in life were blending into one strong circle. But there were moments, small ones, that didn't quite fit. A conversation that stopped when she entered the room. A text Daniel quickly cleared from his phone. A canceled gym session that neither of them explained. Monique noticed, but she brushed it aside. Her schedule was demanding. Her wedding checklist was long, and she told herself not to overthink the little things. She believed the trust she had in both men was unshakable. Friends and family saw no reason to think otherwise. Marcus was still helping with wedding details, suit fittings, travel plans. Daniel was still talking about their honeymoon in Jamaica. Nothing seemed out of place. On the surface, everything was moving toward that day in March, but the night before the ceremony, all of it would come to a sudden and unexplained stop. March 2010. 2 weeks until the wedding. Monique's life was running on 2 tracks at once, back-to-back shifts at the hospital, and final touches for the ceremony. Every spare moment was filled with phone calls to vendors, emails to caterers, and late-night checklists spread across her kitchen counter. Marcus was on tuxedo duty, making sure the groomsmen were fitted and ready. Daniel was confirming honeymoon reservations and picking up their marriage license. To anyone looking in, it was a picture of coordination. 3 days before the wedding, Monique hosted a small dinner at her apartment, just close friends and family. Marcus sat next to Daniel. They joked about who would give the better speech at the reception. Monique laughed with them, never imagining that this would be the last time she'd see them together under her roof. March 5th, the night before the ceremony. Monique finished her shift just after 9 p.m. and headed home. She called Marcus to confirm his arrival time for the rehearsal. No answer. She tried Daniel. Straight to voicemail. It wasn't unusual for one of them to miss a call, both at the same time. That was different. By 10:30 p.m., she'd sent 3 texts to Daniel, 2 to Marcus. Nothing came back. No call you later. No I'm busy. Just silence. She tried again at midnight. Still no response. At 6:45 a.m. the next morning, Monique's first thought was that something had gone wrong with travel or last-minute errands. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. Her chest tightened. By 9:20 a.m., after driving to Marcus's apartment and finding it empty, she called Daniel's hotel room. The desk clerk told her he hadn't checked in at all the night before. That's when she dialed 911. 2 people, her twin brother and her fiancé, had vanished in the span of a single night. The Raleigh Police Department logged the call at 9:24 a.m., March 6, 2010. 2 adult males, both last seen the evening before, both connected to the same woman. Monique Harris met the responding officers at her apartment. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she explained the timeline. The unanswered calls, the lack of messages, the empty apartment, the hotel clerk's statement. Detectives moved quickly. They started with the basics. Last known locations, known associates, vehicle registrations. Daniel Rivers' sedan was still parked outside Monique's building, the same spot it had been in for days. Marcus's pickup truck, however, was gone. By mid-afternoon, officers were knocking on doors in Marcus's neighborhood. A neighbor remembered seeing his truck leave around 9:45 p.m. the night before. No one could confirm who was driving. Phone records came next. Both phones had been active until 10:47 p.m. on March 5th. After that, nothing. Not a single ping to a cell tower. It was as if they'd powered down and vanished into the dark. Detectives checked local hospitals, jails, and transit hubs. No matches. Security cameras at nearby intersections offered little. A few grainy images, none conclusive. By the second day, Monique was calling them every few hours for updates. There was nothing to give her. No evidence of foul play. No signs they'd left willingly. No paper trail to follow. Detective Carla Jennings, lead on the case, put it plainly in her first briefing. We have 2 missing adults with no known reason to disappear. We are treating this as a high-priority investigation until proven otherwise. For Monique, that wasn't enough. Every hour without answers felt heavier than the one before. By the end of the week, she had started her own search, calling friends, co-workers, and distant relatives, hoping someone had heard from them. No one had. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The investigation into Marcus Harris and Daniel Rivers stalled. Detectives rechecked every lead, again and again. There were no ransom demands, no unusual bank withdrawals, no travel records. It was as if the 2 men had simply erased themselves from Raleigh. By late summer 2010, the search had shifted from active investigation to periodic case review. Detective Jennings admitted to Monique in a quiet phone call, "We're not closing it, but without new evidence, there's nothing more we can do right now." For Monique, that wasn't closure. It was a wall. She stayed in Raleigh another 2 years, worked double shifts at the hospital, tried to move through life in small, manageable pieces, one patient at a time, one day at a time. But the silence was constant. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Every empty chair reminded her of who was missing. In 2012, she accepted a position at a smaller medical center in Oklahoma City. It was a chance to start fresh in a place where no one knew her history. She bought a modest townhouse, kept her circle small, and avoided talking about the wedding that never happened. But she never stopped looking. Every few months she would check online public records, scan social media profiles, run searches for any hint of Marcus or Daniel. Some leads seemed promising. A man with Daniel's build in a Facebook photo. Someone who looked like Marcus in a charity event flyer. But each time it ended the same way. A dead end. By 2015, Raleigh PD officially labeled the case inactive. It would only be reopened if new information surfaced. For Monique, that was confirmation of what she had already felt for years, that if she wanted answers, she would have to find them herself. February 2020. 2. Monique Harris was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, attending a 3-day medical conference. It was routine. Lectures, panel discussions, networking dinners. Nothing about it felt unusual. On the second afternoon, she skipped the last breakout session and decided to walk. The conference hotel sat near Riverside Park, a stretch of winding paths and open green space along the Arkansas River. The winter air was cool, the sun low. She followed the curve of the path until she heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh. One she hadn't heard in over a decade. She froze. Her eyes moved toward a small playground near the water's edge. 2 men stood side by side, talking. Both older than she remembered. One had the same walk, the same easy posture as Marcus. The other, Daniel Rivers. Older, slightly heavier, but unmistakable. Her heart began to pound. Her breath felt short. She watched as they turned toward each other, smiling. Marcus reached for Daniel's hand. A simple, familiar touch. They walked together toward the parking lot. Monique followed, careful to keep her distance. They stopped at a dark SUV, loaded grocery bags into the back, and drove off. In that moment, something shifted inside her. The years of wondering were over. She knew where they were. They were alive. They were together. And they had built a life without her. She didn't approach them that day. Instead, she went back to her hotel room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for nearly an hour. By the time the conference ended, she had made a decision. She wasn't going home. Not yet. Monique Harris didn't fly back to Oklahoma City after the conference. She extended her hotel stay in Tulsa, quietly. For the next few days, she retraced the route from Riverside Park to the parking lot, noting every possible camera and every side street. She didn't tell anyone where she was. Her colleagues thought she'd taken a few extra days for rest. On the third morning, she saw the SUV again. This time she followed. A 20-minute drive led her to a quiet suburban neighborhood, tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns. Every house looked like it had been pulled from the same blueprint. Marcus and Daniel pulled into a 2-story brick home at the end of a cul-de-sac. Monique drove past slowly, memorizing the house number. That night, she parked 2 streets over and waited. At 6:12 p.m., the SUV returned from what looked like a gym trip. At 7:40 p.m., Marcus stepped outside to bring in the trash bins. At 8:15 p.m., the upstairs lights went dark. Over the next week, Monique built a timeline: when they left for work, when they returned, which nights they were home, where they shopped. She learned that Marcus was listed under a different last name: Carter. Daniel, too. Together they owned a fitness and wellness studio on the south side of Tulsa. It was popular, well-reviewed, and profitable. Each night she returned to her hotel room, sat in the dark, and thought about the years she'd spent searching. The unanswered questions, the wedding that never happened, the silence. Now she had her answers, and she couldn't let go of the weight they carried. March 12, 2022. Tulsa, Oklahoma. The day began like any other, at least for Marcus and Daniel. But for Monique Harris, it was the day she had decided it would end. She parked 2 blocks away from their home, just after 8:45 p.m. The street was quiet. The only light came from the glow of porch lamps and the pale wash of the moon. She sat in her car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, inside her purse, was a 9mm handgun. It wasn't new. She had owned it for years, kept it locked in a safe. That night, it wasn't locked away. At 9:03 p.m., she stepped out of the car and began walking. Every footstep felt heavier than the one before. By the time she reached the brick walkway to their front door, her heartbeat was so loud she could hear it in her ears. She rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Marcus Harris froze. His expression shifted in an instant. Recognition, shock, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Monique," he said, voice low. She stepped forward into the doorway. Daniel appeared from the hallway behind him. "What is this?" Daniel asked, his tone tight. Monique's voice was steady. 12 years, she said. 12 years, wondering where you were, why you left, and this is where I find you. Marcus tried to close the door, but she pushed against it, stepping inside. The 3 of them stood in the foyer, no more than 6 feet between them. The argument erupted. Accusations, questions with no answers. Her voice rising, theirs trying to calm her, then rising to meet hers. Her hand moved to her purse. She pulled the gun. Daniel raised his hands. "Monique." 2 shots. The sound tore through the air. Marcus fell first. Daniel collapsed. Seconds later, the room went silent except for her breathing. She stood there for a moment, staring at the 2 men on the floor. Then she turned, walked to the door, and stepped out into the night. By 9:09 p.m., she was gone. At 9:15 p.m., Tulsa police received multiple calls reporting gunshots on a quiet cul-de-sac on the city's south side. Patrol units were dispatched immediately. The first officers arrived at 9:17 p.m. They found the front door ajar. Inside, 2 adult males were down in the entryway, both unresponsive. Tulsa Fire Department paramedics confirmed within minutes. There was nothing they could do. Detectives secured the scene. No signs of forced entry. No ransacking. Wallets, keys, and personal items still in place. They began working outward, knocking on doors, asking neighbors what they'd seen or heard. One neighbor recalled hearing the doorbell ring just before the shots. Another reported seeing a woman walking away from the home toward the main road. The house had a security system, one with cameras covering the front porch and entryway. The footage showed a woman arriving at 9:03 p.m., stepping inside at 9:04, and leaving at 9:09. The quality was clear enough to see her face. By 10:30 p.m., Investigators had a still image printed and circulating through the department. It didn't take long for someone to recognize her. Dr. Monique Harris, former Raleigh resident, now practicing in Oklahoma City. Detective Carla Jennings, who had led the missing persons case in 2010, was contacted for confirmation. Her response was short. "That's her. No question." March 14th, 2022. 2 days after the shooting, Tulsa detectives tracked Monique Harris to a roadside motel just off Interstate 44. At 7:18 a.m., they knocked on the door. When she answered, there was no struggle, no questions. She simply stepped aside, allowing them in. She was taken into custody without incident. In her purse, the same 9mm handgun from the scene. At the station, she waived her right to remain silent. Her statement was brief. "I spent 12 years looking for them. I found them. That's all there is." The trial date was set for April 2023. In court, the defense painted a picture of a woman crushed under the weight of betrayal, a bride abandoned by both her twin brother and her fiancé on the same night. They argued she suffered an emotional break after seeing them living a full life together. The prosecution countered with precision. They laid out her surveillance of the victims. They showed the jury her week-long tracking of their routines. They called it premeditated, methodical, and deliberate. Halfway through the trial, Monique changed her plea to guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. Her voice cracked as she addressed the court. "I thought I could live with the questions. I couldn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want it to end." The judge's words were final. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence left two families in pieces. For the Harris family, it was the loss of both twins, Marcus to death, Monique to a prison cell. Daniel Rivers' relatives chose silence. They issued no public statements, refused all interview requests, and declined to attend sentencing. The Raleigh home where Monique once planned her wedding was sold years earlier. The photos she kept from that time never made the trip to Oklahoma. In Tulsa, the house on the cul-de-sac was listed for sale 6 months after the murders. Neighbors said no one stayed long. It was just another address, with a history no one wanted to talk about. Inside the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Monique Harris begins each morning the same way. Up before sunrise, breakfast in a silent dining hall, then hours in the prison infirmary, where she now works as a medical assistant. The skills that once saved lives are now used behind locked doors. She has no visitors, no interviews, no appeals. Her story is a reminder of how betrayal can hollow a person out, how anger left unchecked can grow into something you can't control. If you take anything from this, let it be this. When you're carrying a wound that deep, you can't heal it alone. If you or someone you know is living with rage, grief, or the need for revenge, talk to someone today. Find a counselor. Reach out to a friend. Do it before you make a choice you can't take back. Because once the trigger is pulled, there's no going back. Subscribe for more real cases, more real lessons, and more reminders that every choice shapes tomorrow.